Tonight, a former Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, says Kavanaugh's testimony before the Senate should disqualify him from serving on the nation's highest court. Let's bring in our analysts and let's talk, Laura, about what former Justice John Paul Stevens told a group down in Boca Raton, Florida. Listen to this.
At that time, I thought he had definitely the qualifications for to sit on the Supreme Court and should be confirmed if he was ever selected. But I've changed my views for reasons that have no relationship to his intellectual ability or his record as a federal judge. He's a fine federal judge, and he should have been confirmed when he was nominated. But I think that his performance during the hearings caused me to change my mind.
What do you think?
Well, you know, a lot of people speculated that he might have to recuse himself from a number of cases that would have some partisan connotation. He was very, very clear that he was anti the Democrats who were against him. It seemed that he was talking about himself as somebody who was the victim of this siege because of revenge or vengeance on the behalf of the Clintons. You have this feeling that he may not be able to be the nonpartisan, diplomatic, objective arbiter that you want to have on a bench, certainly in the Supreme Court. That's not supposed to be a political body at all. And remember, from his very first confirmation opening statement, he talked about that very issue, that the Supreme Court should never, ever be a political body. And then he comes out swinging in many ways because he was indignant based on the allegations that he feels were wrongful towards him. But in larger respect, he did exactly what he was accused of being prior to his confirmation in the D.C. Circuit, which is being a political operative who had motivations other than being a nonpartisan arbiter. And so Justice Stevens, who certainly is well qualified to say who should be on the Supreme Court and should not, is telling you part of that very reason.
What do you think, Justice Stevens' statement? Will it have an impact among these undecided senators?
No in the near term, yes in the long term. No in the near term. He belongs to a Republican Party of memory that doesn't really exist anymore, a kind of centrist Republican Party circa the Gerald Ford era that has been kind of run over successively generations from Newt Gingrich to Donald Trump. But in the long term, I think absolutely. I mean, just think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about a justice who is not just any justice. He's being put on the court to be the fifth member of a Republican bloc that will be a majority potentially for 15 years, who is facing these allegations, who has a majority of the public opposing, or at least a plurality of the public opposing him, who is facing these kinds of questions about his legitimacy. And I think, but in the near term, no. But does this make it more likely that the House looks at it next year if the Democrats take it? Sure. And does it create more questions about the political legitimacy of the court and the independence of the court as this majority goes on? Don't forget, Clarence Thomas, the oldest member of this majority, is 70. These 5 men could set the rules for the country for the next 15 years while we're going through enormous changes, and I think that is just a ticking time bomb.
As you know, there are a few senators who will decide whether or not he is confirmed, goes to the Supreme Court or not. 51 Republicans, 49 Democrats. If the Republicans, if all the Democrats vote against them and the Republicans lose 2, it's over. Who are you watching?
That's right, Wolf. So there are 3 Republicans who are on the fence now that are really going to be the key deciders when it comes to this vote. Jeff Flake, you can see here, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins of Maine. Jeff Flake, prior to the hearing where he had his dramatic change of heart, was planning to confirm Kavanaugh. He was planning to vote yes and support him. And he decided at the last minute that he wanted this FBI investigation just as this extra blanket of security, this insurance policy to make sure nothing had been missed. If he reads this report, as he has suggested in some statements today, and doesn't find anything new, I would think that Jeff Flake is likely to support Kavanaugh. But Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, really the wild cards here.
If one of them, and Susan Collins earlier in the day, she went back a second time, but earlier in the day, she said she didn't see any corroborating evidence.
Right, and she said the report was thorough. She thought the FBI investigation seemed to be thorough, and so that would suggest that she's pretty satisfied right now with where things stand. But of course, she hasn't made her official decision.
She's been signaling from the beginning, right? I mean, saying that he would not overturn Roe. Describing the FBI report as thorough. I mean, you can say a lot of things about an investigation of 9 or 10 people, but thorough would be not the hill that you probably want to die on in describing this report.
Well, and then if you assume, of course, Susan Collins and Jeff Flake are yeses, Lisa Murkowski probably is not going to be the odd man out here.
If two of them are yeses, it's basically all over. He's he's
And then
confirmed.
that frees up Manchin as well to
Yeah,
jump in.
That's a good point.